All right, my friends, so a lot of people want a fast and strong push, but you got to be able to have a slow and controlled one before you get there. So today we're going to be talking about one skill set that is very underrated. No one really talks about it, or at least goes into depth and explains it. So this is what the video is about. And so if you're feeling very unstable, uncomfortable, and like a beginner when you push, or when you need to get a good push for a spot you're skating or an obstacle, or you feel like you just, have awkward pushes, right? Like little short strides, then this video is going to help you understand how you can get to the point where you have, fast and controlled, fast, strong, and controlled pushes. So first things first, some common mistakes when anyone's pushing is when they do their push, they go from one leg to the other, right? They go from one leg to the other, one leg to the other. Another thing that kind of adds on to that is as they're going from one leg to the other, this part of the top half of their body is very stiff. So they stay, just in facing one direction instead of allowing themselves to move in a fluid manner. So it can be a bit more effective with recruiting, control, strength, and some speed. So if that's you, a quick thing you can go about changing real quick is making sure that when you take your first push, you are centered over that lead foot, right? So if you can see how I'm centered over that lead foot, many of us might ask, okay, how do I be centered over that foot when I take my first push? The answer to that is making sure that when you go to take your push, right, you are using the hips, the slight hinge at the hip and a slight bend at the knee to get lower into that foot, so that when you push, you can reach the ground comfortably instead of extending or staying extended, being stiff, and going from one leg to the other and doing this waddle kind of motion. Little recap. You want to make sure you can stay there. You're centered over that lead foot. Use your hips, hinge at the hips, bend the knees slightly so that you can get low and reach the ground for a good push. This might feel a bit intense in the beginning, especially if your biomechanics are restrictive, or you're just not strong enough to basically balance on that one foot for that split second. As you put in your reps and get comfortable, take it slow at first. This motion right here where you get lower, it's so much more effortless and it feels so much more fluid. So you'll just eventually do this, where you're just pushing, right? Now, going back to many of us being stiff from the waist up, staying facing one direction. What makes that very limiting is the fact that because we're not able to rotate, we're not really using the potential power, right? So us being able to go from one side, open up to one side and then the other, right, allows us to recruit that power. It's kind of like winding your arm back so that you can throw. You see how I'm opening up one direction and then as I throw, I finish off in the other. It's very similar with a push. You're going to go down, maybe be slightly just opened up to the direction you're going. As you push though, you're gonna want to allow the top half of your body, or at least the chest, to face the opposite direction slightly, right? So check it out. As I push, I'm facing to the left. As I go in for the push, right, my body's slightly facing the right side. So down here, facing right, a push to the left. So again, we don't want to be stiff and stay on one side as we push. We want to be able to rotate the top half of our body. Okay, this is going to allow us to, in a sense, wind up that push. So this is what you don't want to do. Open up towards one side of where you're skating, but instead you want to be able to, for one, make sure that when you go for the push, you're facing one way, you allow yourself to rotate a little bit. It's kind of like when you walk, right? When I take the first step, my body opens up towards the foot. When I take the next step, my body opens up towards that foot. It's a slight thing, right? We don't want to be doing this, or else we're going to be waddling like a penguin. We want to make sure we're walking as biomechanically friendly, right? That's just how we operate, right? Again, throwing a football, you see how I'm facing one way, facing the other. Let's see, throwing baseball, you see how I'm on one foot. Actually, I don't know if this is exactly how you do it, but let's say I'm going for a hit on the baseball, facing one way, finish off the other. We're not starting here with a baseball and throwing it from there, unless you want to do like a little T-ball or something. But we want to be effective and have the potential to push strong. So I bring that up to say, because it seems very counterproductive to be moving up here when you feel very stiff on the legs. It's so much easier to go down when you allow yourself to slightly open up as you keep yourself centered over that foot, right? So open up slightly as you center yourself out over that foot. When you push, you let your top half disengage from that leg. What I want you to understand is you gotta allow the top half of your body to separate from your bottom half. So don't just think about what your bottom half is doing as far as stabilizing yourself over the board and pushing, but also think about how the top half is positioned in a way to allow yourself to push in a comfortable manner. Now we're gonna connect the two, and what I want you to get out of this is, how are you feeling like you're stabilizing, right, throughout that push? So on top of what I mentioned about separating the two, you want to think about engaging your whole body to that push. Through that engagement, you're gonna notice that what you're doing is getting lower. You get lower most effectively by just bringing back the hips and bending the knee slightly, and you can even say flexing your ankle. This is extending, this is flexing. You flex, you allow your ankle to flex, you allow your knee to slightly bend and your hips to hinge so slightly. This can be made, can be exaggerated by getting low as possible, or you can get kind of tall, right? But still keep that engagement. So here, real quick, engagement. All right, and this allows me to be, you know, as stable as possible. And depending on how long you go about pushing in this way, your muscles are going to strengthen together, and the more extended you might look. But even the most experienced skaters who look like they're just standing tall, you know, are able to, you know, contract muscles that are needed to keep themselves engaged. So you want to think about connecting top half and bottom half by making sure you're engaging in that way. But don't forget to stabilize over that lead foot. So the lead foot is basically the foot that is on the board, right? This gets a bit tricky for skaters who are pushing Mongo, right? Because the lead foot in the push is this back one, right? So I would say that's a whole separate video, but assuming that you're pushing the most effective way, which is with your lead foot forward, right? This is using your back foot as the lead foot forward, right? As a regular skater, lead foot. As a goofy skater, right foot is the lead foot. Now, if you find yourself trying to push fast and you keep kind of like tipping off, then you will also want to consider that you might be pressurizing or applying that tension through on the wrong side of the board. So you want to think about the board having a center line, right? So let's imagine a line right here between the bolts, and starting at the very top of the nose, very top of the tail. Now that center line, in order for your board to stay leveled out, is where you need to pressurize, right? You can pressurize it with your foot being straight down the middle like this, where it doesn't bend, because if I place it on what is my heel side, let's say I place it on the heel side, you can see it turning, right? Check it out. If I place it on the heel side, you're gonna see it turning. Place it on the toe side, you're gonna see it turning. So we wanna make sure we're on the center. As we get on our board, yes, we can offset it by putting pressure on the toe side of the back foot. Look, I can center it, toe side on the back foot, but this leads to a lot of, how do I say this? Habits that are just based from compensation. We don't want to compensate. We want to be able to, you know, be as efficient as possible instead of building habits that stem from compensation. So, like I said, we want it to work without the help of the back foot. We want being able to stabilize to work, without needing the back foot to help. So here we go. If you're someone who also struggles with, you know, turning their foot back on after the push, or even just pushing from this direction where their foot is kind of pointed towards the nose instead they need to do this, right? Practice slightly moving this, playing around with this. So with getting here. So maybe you don't start right here, but instead you slowly make your way there, so that little by little you're getting comfortable with understanding where you need to have your foot so that you can push. Because when it comes down to pushing as fast as you can, it's very difficult having your foot like this and pushing fast. It's so much more effective to learn how to push with your foot pointed towards the nose like this, and then learning how to push like that, and then if you need to, turn the foot back, right, like this. You're pushing, turn it back, and to do the trick. Okay, so prioritize stabilizing yourself by keeping that forefoot over the center line. Which leads me to the next thing. If you feel like as you push, you're having so much pressure applied, or so much tension applied through the heel, then you also want to think about rechecking if you're actually hinging at the hips, knees bent, and ankle is allowed to be flexed, because this allows for you to apply that tension that's needed through the forefoot. If you're tall, disengaged, you're gonna feel very heel heavy, which can lead to its own, you know, set of problems that are going to eventually be very counterproductive to the progression of your skateboarding. Just because it might seem like you're pushing correctly, you really got to understand it should feel very fluid, and it should feel correctly through applying that tension through the forefoot. So we covered the forefoot, applying tension through the forefoot, we covered centering ourselves over that lead foot, we covered being engaged, separating the top and the bottom half. If you're someone who's already comfortable pushing fast and you see this as a waste of time, just understand that it's always going to come up once you're challenging yourself in different situations where you may not push, or you may not be able to approach the obstacle or that skate park or that flow with the pushes you're comfortable with, right? Sometimes you're confined to a narrow path, other times you're having open space. So you want to be prepared for either situation, or any situation that falls between that, where you have the most control possible in your push. So don't see this as a waste of time, but see it as a way to slowly improve yourself and refine your stability. You can see it as like getting better, getting 1% better every time you step on your board, because pushing is something that you do every time. Unless you're skating bowls, you know, and you kind of don't do any pushing, that's a little different. But for the most part, pushing strengthens our understanding of how to stabilize. And you can also apply this if you're super comfortable pushing in your regular stance already, and you follow these things I've mentioned, and you feel very stable. Just practice the switch. You know, it's the same concepts. It just feels very uncomfortable because it's your switch stance, right? Which is generally a stance that most skaters don't really put the same amount of time they do with the regular stance. So there's always ways to improve your push, and I hope that this video shared or had you thinking of what you can apply to your own pushing practice. And do not forget about the small things, the small skill sets that we can always improve upon, just like pushing. I hope you enjoyed this video. There's gonna be so many more on the way. Lives almost daily, memberships are actually already offered, so check that out if you're interested in coaching or lessons. But if you just want some feedback on a trick, or have a video you want to share, you can also send that to Profe Carlos on Instagram, and we can also talk about how coaching or lessons may work for you. And if you're someone who's not in LA, don't feel like you can't benefit from coaching because it's not in person. Online in many ways has its own benefits. So having said that, I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next ones, and make sure to comment, ask questions. If you need some clarification, I'm all for it. So comment on these videos.
Finish with the proper push.
Finish with a proper push. Okay.